This is the regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. We have a quorum. Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Koretz, myself, Bernard Parks is the chair. We're going to go through our agenda, and our first two items will be closed session, which we'll do first. What I'd like to do on item 6 is to go have that go on consent. One of the things I'd ask, do we have anyone here from LADOT? Let me ask Lorraine, if there's two questions I'd like to see if we could add to the committee report. Is on number 6 is to find out from LADOT the specific usage of that fund so that we can have that in the report. And secondly, if we're going to cheat those funds, does this close down this account? Cause it to be eliminated. So we then need an ordinance to then close it. So if that's okay, we could move
I just
that.
want to know what the word escheatment.
You're taking, it's a taking. Basically, there's funds sitting there for 3 years and no one's claimed them, so we're taking them and put them in the general fund.
Nice word. Okay.
Sort of what we're trying to do with everything this year.
Yeah. See, if it was internal, we'd call it a sweep.
External. But all these people have been notified, everybody knows,
Oh, yeah.
blah, blah.
Yeah, all those, what we've insisted on any of these is you see a significant number of newspaper articles, a variety of local newspapers to advise people. At one time, they just used to notify the Daily Journal, and we've expanded it to a significant number of newspapers.
Very cool.
Okay, so if we can move item 6 on consent.
So moved.
And so then, with those two requests from Lorraine to get from LADOT, and then we'll go to items 1 and 2 in closed session, and then come back on the agenda. And then also, just for item 3, if there's any specific cases that committee members want to talk about, we can also deal with that in closed session. Otherwise, we'll deal with it in open session. If you're dealing with specific issues on specific cases.
What happened on the day off?
Last week, I went to court and notified everybody that was starting.
Give me a second.
Okay, you ready for item number 3? Item number 3 is a city attorney report relative to the status of liability claims accounts as of December 31st, 2009.
And 3 and 4?
And then when we read 4 is a city attorney report relative to cost-saving measures implemented by the city attorney for the use of outside counsel.
Good afternoon. Ann Haley, City Attorney's Office.
You dealing with both of them?
No, just actually item 4. Only the...
Okay, who's here for 3 on the litigation, the liability?
Was that
That would have
Gary?
been, did Gary leave us?
Yeah, I think that was Gary.
Was he in closed? I thought he was
In
in
the
closed.
closed session, yeah.
Okay,
I
well,
can call and have someone come back on that, shall I?
okay, why don't you go on 4, and then if we can call it, this Gary, and see if we can get him back here.
Okay, I will do that.
Ann, what's the number?
Actually, the general, 977.
No.
So I know, Councilman Parks, you had requested some time ago that we report on measures we have taken with regard to outside counsel
Yes.
savings. And so, and I'm hopeful that the attachments, I don't know if you had the attachments, although the text of the report really addresses what the attachments would have had, but you'll see that most notably, we have for some years now had in place, as you all are familiar perhaps, a policy directive with regard to how outside counsel would be utilized by the city attorney's office. But in recent months, due to the fiscal issues being faced by the city, we have re-upped some of those and enforced at higher levels some of the measures that were already in place. We've actually instituted some new measures with regard to outside counsel usage. And those are the things we wanted to share with you. I don't know if there are any particular questions, but as you go through, you see that even from the point of deciding whether or not the office will utilize outside counsel, we have a committee in place that vets each request for outside counsel. And one thing I've noted that whereas that outside counsel committee used to meet weekly, the mindset within the office has been altered such that we don't even have enough requests coming before management to meet weekly. We're meeting more like monthly on an as-is basis with regard to outside counsel needs. And that really is, again, is just a matter of having changed, I think, the mindset of the office among our attorneys, such that requests are not being even made as frequently to utilize outside counsel. We still have, obviously, our standard contract in place, which by its terms requests all firms to charge a lesser than their market rate, if you will, in terms of hourly rates. And with regard to that as well, we sent recently, really I think we were the department, Mr. Correttino, who sent first the letter requesting our firms to take a 15% reduction off of the bottom line of their monthly charges. And we have, and this is citywide, our proprietary departments as well, but on the general funded contracts, we got about an 18% response, positive response in that request. So there are about 18% of our contracts, of our general funded contracts, the firms have taken that reduction. We're about to follow up with a second letter, actually. The city attorney has asked that I draft a second letter that will be sent to those firms who were not able or did not see fit to take that 15% reduction. That's reiterating that request in somewhat stronger language. And so we hope to get even a better response there.
Let me ask you, on the report, it reflects about a $700,000 savings for this fiscal year.
Yes.
Where did those funds go, and are they still part of the existing account? Are they reallocated, or just how were they used?
they are not yet reallocated. So by year end, what we are saying is that we will, of our $3.75 million that was set aside in the UB for outside counsel, we will reduce that amount by $700,000, which is still in the account. It has not been reverted yet.
So that's real money.
That's real money.
Okay. And then also, in dealing with the, could you give me the figure again of how many of your firms have voluntarily reduced their contracts?
It's 18% of the contract. So it's, and believe it or not, that's only 2 law firms on our general funded contracts, but both of those firms have multiple contracts. So one has 3 and the other one has 2 contracts. So between the 5 matters that they are.
So the 18%, is there any hope that we're going to get significantly higher than the 18%?
Yes. I really expect that with the follow-up letter that will go out within the week, we will get more of the firms to,
How much money are we talking about,
I have the,
potentially?
actually, you know what, it's about $1.5 million. I mean, not just from the 15%. We have, from the 15% request currently, it's about $25,000 that we've saved since the fall, because our first request went out in September or so of last year. So we have actually tracked the savings at $24,500. But between that savings, our savings from invoice review, which is another area where we're really cracking down, which we've always done. You know, we've always done invoice review, but with even more vigilant invoice review, we've saved $150,000. Just, again, that's for this fiscal year to date in invoice review. So that's, of course, you look at the invoice, you say, this is not a reasonable charge, or this, the contract doesn't allow this, and so $150,000 there. And then another area where we've stepped up, in fact, we'll be coming back to you by the end of April, I suspect, with our final request for, for funds we need for existing contracts through the end of the year. And before we ever come to you to make a funding request, we send a budget to the firms that they're to fill out with their projections. And then I meet with our partnering attorneys within the office to go over the firm's budgets to make sure that our attorneys feel that they're reasonable and in line with what they know to be they're supposed to be partnering with the firms, you understand? So even in that process, we show $270,000 in savings from what the firm projected their needs were. And then in discussion, we've reduced the request by about $270,000. You see what I'm saying? So just in discussion, and most of this, I'm just learning, is that you just pay a little bit of attention to it, and you can tweak it ever so slightly, and every little bit counts, as we know. And then a final area of real savings is that we have brought some matters back in-house. You all just heard from the fabulous Corey Brent, and you can't hire outside counsel as brilliant as he is. And the Mayday matters, we actually had 2 law firms assigned to, as you might remember. We are going to we're going to close those contracts and revert what's left in those 2 to the general fund as well, or for reallocation, because Corey and his crew will be handling those in-house. So the Mayday area we brought in-house. This perhaps not for open session, but there's another matter. We have an appeal in a case that was with outside counsel, and we are anticipating an appeal. The appeal we will now handle in-house. We typically would have left it with the firm, but based on what appeals with outside counsel have cost us previously, it's about $300,000 to $500,000. We will handle that in-house now, and so I consider that savings as well. So that's.
Are you looking at the savings that are occurring this year, that they'll carry over to next year? And do we expect additional savings, or are we flatlining them for this year?
Well, I think where we will see the savings next year is that our request for outside counsel will not be as high, the set aside. In fact, we've made that. And so, I do anticipate that the bottom line expenditure on outside counsel will be less next year than it has been. And
Is that correspond to 10-11 budget that you're asking for less money?
Yes, it is less than 3.75, certain. and that, and see, from that perspective, that is occasioned just by the fact that we have taken a new position of really sending as little bit out as possible. Still, though, with the qualifier that you never know what might happen. I mean, it's conceivable that something could come along that we do not have the expertise in-house to handle, or that it's such a huge piece of litigation that we don't have the numbers of people to handle it. So if something should come up that we don't yet know about, we could.
We're moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's only one area, and I've expressed this concern, I think, before, where we might look good on the expenditure side, but we probably, I shouldn't say probably, I don't have enough knowledge to say that conclusively, but we possibly may wind up with a net loss, having brought some of our workers' comp in-house. Because I've had passing conversations with some of the folks that worked at some of those firms, and their concern is that the city could actually be doing a lot better in terms of reducing its payouts, but that because we have much more minimal staffing, we do the minimal amount that you can to get by on a case, and we don't do as much discovery and other things that we could be doing. I'm not saying that we should go back to outside counsel, but we should look at what we can do to mimic the right things that they do that we may not be doing. And my concern is that in a time where we're cutting and we're looking to reduce, we may even be going further in the wrong direction when counterintuitively the right thing to do from a financial standpoint might be to spend more in this area rather than less.
And now, of course, even in the workers' comp area, sworn and conflict cases still do go to outside counsel. So we still do have some workers' comp law firms in place. But
I'm not concerned about who does it. I'm concerned about how it's done. When it's done in the outside, I suspect they do everything they can, because it's sort of a win-win in both directions. They do more work, and they can reduce the payouts from the city's coffers.
Yes.
How do we get to the point where on the rest of those cases we may be doing the same thing as we probably should be?
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up as well, because one of the terms in our contract is partnering with outside counsel. So that is one of the real goals of our city attorney as well, is to make sure we're learning to the extent we're not teaching them, but that we're learning from our outside counsel, and so that perhaps when the next similar matter comes along, we will have the knowledge in-house. Just so there is a partnering, in answer to your question or in response to it, that we are, to the extent a workers' comp firm is doing something that we are not doing in the matters we handle in-house.
I think it's two pieces there. One's the expertise, to know how far you need to go to do it right. The other is the caseload. And just like claims adjusters, which I had the opportunity to be for a minimal period of time, but a good learning opportunity for me years ago, you can tell the difference between how well you manage your cases at an inappropriate caseload number and how well you may be able to manage your cases when you have the time to put in that you should. That's my concern, that in this time of cutting, even if we get the right direction, we may not allocate the right number of people to working on these cases, and it may actually cost us money.
Right.
And I'm trying, as we do all these layoffs, we're all trying to make sure that we don't do anything that actually costs us money. So my question is, how do we make sure that we handle these cases with as extensive a group of folks working on them as is really needed, and don't cost us money by understaffing in this area?
Right. Well, I guess the best way, really, and this falls under Gary's shop, but is to really look at the productivity, to look at the results we're getting, and to the extent we count on our lawyers to let us know if they're too overburdened to do the job that needs to be done, certainly on a particular matter. And the thing is, you bring up another point. We've always proposed where it might be less expensive to have additional in-house staff, to handle certain matters. Workers' comp was one of those areas, and FLSA, as you recall. But this is obviously perhaps not the environment to add to our in-house staffing, but But you're right, if we can't handle it efficiently and effectively with the staffing we have, either we would need additional lawyers in-house or we will have to send it out. I don't know if you have other...
Yeah, I think we've had like a 4 or 5 year odyssey with this. It's that we asked the city attorney to take people on particularly workers' comp cases off of the hourly rate, and they went to flat rate. And then we began to move them in-house because we added personnel to the city attorney's office for workers' comp. And then we have a brand new third-party administrator. And between the third-party administrator and personnel department and the city attorney, they've produced a better product and a less costly product. And so that's been like a 3-year process to get it to this point. And there's always going to be the balance of when the caseload gets overwhelming and whether we may need to seek relief. But the whole emphasis for the last 3 years has been to bring them in-house because we figured it was a less costly and we got a better product with the city attorney, the third-party administrator, and personnel department working in concert with each other. So that's kind of how we got where we are. But
Well, my only concern is I'm hearing from attorneys that are in court and have these conversations, and it's pretty anecdotal, I admit, that, wow, we gave up a lot more on this case or that case than we should have because we weren't able to do the kind of discovery and other things that we should. And so that concerns me. I don't know how to, I'm not an attorney, I'm not sure I know how to meddle in this issue enough to get us in the right direction, but it seems like we're still not doing as much as we could because we're not staffed up as much as we should be in this particular arena.
I think Gary could comment because we see all those workers' comp cases, and I think you have minimal flexibility once the agreed upon medical examiner has looked at cases and the percentage. And I think that in looking at them, I think they have, particularly since Carl Mooney has been involved with it, you got a bare bones issue, and in almost every case we get on workers' comp, there's a major savings either from no additional litigation or we've settled it or below what the person could ask for or go to trial and get.
That's correct. As far as the workers' compensation section goes, it is formulaic. Our lawyers are overburdened, but not so much that they're not doing certain things. It pretty much I don't want to say conveyor belt type of law, but it is very formulaic. And unfortunately, we are 2 lawyers down in that division now. We're trying to find replacements inside the city attorney's office to fill those positions. And each lawyer has about 250 cases, maybe even a little higher, which is higher than the standard of outside workers' compensation firms. That makes it difficult to take in the flat rate fee cases at the rate that we would like to. As far as the other litigation sections, Mr. Karatz, I have to say, I'm the gate that the lawyers come to between the actual, where the rubber meets the road lawyer and the city attorney. And if any city attorney were to tell me that they are not able to take depositions or they're not able to do the work that they could do, there would certainly be warning flags put up, because that's not how we defend the city of Los Angeles. We defend the city of Los Angeles vigorously, and we do what is necessary at all times in order to win. And if we don't have the resources, then we will either draft resources or we will have to go outside if it's something like an FLSA issue, which is many times beyond the resources that our labor section can deal with, and therefore we go outside, and that's very, very selectively and only with the idea in mind that someone else is better situated to handle that kind of case.
So having that high a caseload, do you think you've been able to handle with minimal damage in terms of our ability to defend cases as best as we can.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning part of that.
Having the caseload as high as it is currently hasn't affected negatively our ability to defend those cases.
No, I believe our caseload is adequate. In our labor section, which happens to be the area that is of the most concern as far as jury verdicts, we have added lawyers as quickly as we can, and I believe that we're looking for people to fill 2 vacancies that we have in that section as well. But whenever there is, and in the 11 years that I have been doing this, I have to say there have been many times that there will be supervisors that will come to me and say we have a real problem going on here before it actually becomes a problem, and that way we can solve that problem by additional resources or by something, but it is not by insufficiently defending the city of Los Angeles.
And you're not hearing that now, obviously.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Thank you.
Here you may comment on the transition from the hourly rate to the flat rate and to bringing some cases inside as to the quality and the workload and such from your perspective, because that's been a gradual effort to do that.
Yes.
What is your sense as a supervisor as relates to the quality of their effort?
Oh, I think the transition of the hourly rate cases, taking them back in-house, was tremendous. We were able to take and dispose of many dormant or dead cases, and the cases that we took back inside to actually litigate, I think you found a tremendous amount of savings in that. And it was a success, I think, from every aspect as I look at it. I'd love to have more lawyers in my workers' compensation section so that we could do away with the flat rate fee going outside. But every time we have proposed in each budget, and I think I've been in the budget process for the last 8 years, and I think at least 6 of those 8 years, we have asked for additional lawyers to do that, and the CAO at the time said that's an excellent idea, maybe next year when we have the money, because that's an initial out-of-pocket, and we can't afford it this year, and every year you never can afford it, so it's difficult to allocate extra resources.
Do you think that would result in a net savings, though?
We absolutely believe that it would result in a net savings. I've always advocated for in-house city attorneys as opposed to outside as a net savings. But
If we went completely in that direction, any idea what that would add up to?
off the top of my head, sir, no. I don't have the numbers.
I think one thing that would be helpful, if you could justify, because I'm more interested, as I'm sure Mr. Corretz is and Mr. Parks, if we did it in-house and we saved X dollars over outside, and you could justify that, I'd much rather save money and be in-house than obviously spend more money out-house. I mean, go back to the formula that you came in there, and maybe with our new city attorney, he has said to me clearly, you get rid of those 100 attorneys, I'm going to make up the money to cover that, so don't get rid of them because they're doing this, that, and the other.
Absolutely.
And he's very persuasive to me in that. And I like your line here. I mean, 15% reduction on bills. The department requests that each law firm currently use contract to the city voluntarily reduce their billings by 15%. To date, 10% of the firms have complied. I mean, this is really good stuff for us to see that if they do come back, and you figure overall it would be 1.6 million to get out of this?
Yeah, not just from the 15% reduction.
Yeah.
Which is now, just since this report was filed, as I said, it's gone up to 18% versus 10. But also from the invoice review, the bringing of 4 matters in-house, the May Day and others,
Yeah.
and our budget reviews. And so all told, that's the savings.
And it's very impressive to me to see this, because, we're really beginning to see action. And frankly, I think if the city attorney's office can make compelling evidence that you hire this person, we save X dollars, I'm more inclined to save money that way than outside firms. obviously, I think you're right on the track. You both are on the track.
And we will run those numbers for you. They can easily be run,
Yeah.
what our expenditures, our costs are with regard to outside counsel for workers' comp versus what staffing in-house would be. And while we were talking about workers' comp, I did want to just remind you too, if you didn't know that we just recently amended the workers' comp cases that we do still have, the contracts we do still have with outside counsel, and we introduced a new cost-saving measure there in the flat rate contracts, that rather than the full $5,000, if our lawyers need to hire one of the firms just to do a small matter, just to take a few depositions or whatever, there's now a $500 flat fee option, and that's in the new amendment that you all recently approved. Because normally they were having to pay them $5,000 to do even just a small piece of it. Now there's kind of that tiered approach where they can be a $500 usage or a $5,000 usage, so that's good too.
And on number 4, when this comes to council, if you have some more updated figures, that you have them available at that time? And
Absolutely.
we can present them to the full council.
Yes.
Okay.
And I did just want to make clear, I'm sorry, that the 1.6 we're talking about, that savings, is not that we can reduce that from the 3.75. That'll be more at the 7. But what that avoids is, in previous years, we've been under.
Yeah.
We needed to go to some source to get additional funding. We won't need to do that this year.
One thing that's not, I don't think, included in this report that I think goes to the status of claims accounts, and that is, since the fiscal year began in '09, the general litigation, the litigation section, police litigation, labor, and general, have tried 29 cases. There's been one plaintiff's verdict, and the last demand that we could have settled for versus what we've paid out is over $40 million. So just kind of those statistics, I think, are telling at how hard your trial attorneys are working for you.
Gary, let's just go back to number 3. I have a couple of questions that find out on looking at the attachment 8. I think it's pretty clear once you get the attachment A why you're asking for more money for next year. Is that on I guess page 3 on the footnote, it shows that there's about $6 or $7 million that have been pushed into the 10-11 budget year from settlements that have occurred this year and last year.
Yes.
So I think that kind of information has to be more clear than just the footnote, so people are aware. It's just not asking for more money. It's $6 million already spent. Okay. So the way
All right.
and then, Nabil, you had some question on number 3.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. I just got another one in the meantime, looking at it. The first question I had was the bridges, which I know we can talk about, the inverse condemnation settlement. The other one, which is a little fascinating for me, is the one in the back, which was Waldman versus City.
This is actually open session, and I'm
Yeah, I
reticent to
understand.
discuss anything
I don't want to
specific
discuss
with regard to these open cases.
Right.
So if you'd like to, when this comes up before council, I'm
Yeah.
more than happy to address it.
Yeah, sure. Harry, one other thing, during, I think, the budget hearings, we asked the city attorney to take the lead on the issues of litigation and liability on the top 10 departments. Can you give us any understanding of what efforts we've achieved since July 1st?
I'd have to get back to you with that at council. I'll forward that question on.
No.
All right, if we could have that information, because we gave it as I don't know if we gave it as a verbal instruction or was it a written instruction?
I want to call this a written instruction.
Written instruction asking the city attorney to take a very active role with the top 10 departments on liability and to look at ways in which we could reduce liability during this fiscal year. We just like maybe a verbal when this comes forward.
No problem.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we'll move note and file item 3 and receive and file item 4.
Thank you.
And then I understand. No. No, I'm sorry.
We'll wait till you get across the hall first.
So, and then I understand Mr. Weezer is not here, so we can continue number 9. Okay.
Okay. All right, that takes us to item number 5, which was continued from the November 2009 committee meeting. This is the Department of Water Power, Department of Airports, and Harbor reports in response to motion Park Cigar City relative to the validity of vendor-submitted business tax registration certificate numbers and adequate controls to assess the numbers.
The staff.
I believe we have the reports from the 3 proprietary departments.
And we have a representative from Department of Finance.
That's Larry.
Larry Minoki with Office
All
of
right.
Finance.
Okay. Why don't you start off on the issue of, from your perspective in the Department of Finance, where we are in complying with the controller's audit, and what we're really interested in is that these issues are going to be institutionalized so that they are part of the fabric of getting work done, as opposed to us coming back later and finding out that maybe some of these systems fell apart.
Okay, back in 2008, we were forwarded files from the Controller's Office relative to the 3 departments on their list of vendors. And we went ahead and researched the entire, all 3 lists, and provided a report with the disposition of each record, and returned these files back to the 3 departments, so that on a go-forward basis, from that point, they would be up to date in terms of registration, payments, et cetera. We, at the time, established a liaison in the Office of Finance to work with the 3 departments on future vendors that they were bringing into the city, to verify that they were, in fact, registered with the city. That is, to my knowledge, that's still in place. The person that, actually the liaison that we retired recently, so I think in that regard we need to replace that person, but the program in general, I think, is on track on a go-forward basis.
When I talked with you earlier, you said that the Department of Finance has sent a correspondence to the controller commenting on the progress of the 3 departments. Okay. Could we ensure that that report gets in the council file, because we don't have access to that communication? We have the 3 department responding, but we do not have the Department of Finance making any comments about what the progress is.
Okay, I did forward that report to you earlier this
I
afternoon.
mean, we need to get it in the city clerk.
Okay.
In council file.
Okay.
And then from, also from LAX, if you can give us, because from looking at your response, it appears that you've kind of nailed down this thing as it relates to your financial system to ensure that there are no lapses in the future.
Yes, Mark Adams, Los Angeles World Airports. We have, in our financial management system, the software requires that before we issue a vendor registration number to put somebody in the system, they have to have a BTRC number either in place or in process with the Office of Finance, and then before the payment can be sent out, the BTRC number has to be in the system.
So the system will reject a payment if it's not complete.
That's correct.
And so it's a mandatory entry.
It's a mandatory entry before the payment will be issued, and it's actually, we either have to put it in at the time the vendor registers in the system, or have it, like I said, in process. We did over 700 vendor registrations, 700 new vendors last year for one reason or another, and in our system, and all but 10 had BTRCs at the time we set them up in the system, and then before, like I said, they were all cleaned up before we issued any payments.
Do you have any sense of, since you've gone through this effort, how many people were in your system and did not have the proper information before you set up this current system?
I believe we were. I don't have any statistics for you on that. as I sit here, but I could get those for you. But I think we were pretty good. I think it was a matter of some had fallen through the cracks sort of a thing, but the efforts with the Office of Finance, I think, have proven very effective at bringing us, closing those gaps up.
Report.
I'm John Dennis with DWP. Our findings were similar, but I would just say that the larger numbers that at first glance appeared to be some larger numbers, many of those were out of town or governmental agencies that were exempted, so we also cleared those up in our record keeping.
Do you have the same system on the financial records that the system won't cut the check if the numbers aren't in the system?
Ours is not the same as that. So
Is there potential of getting that, or do you have any other safeguards?
I would need to look into that one. Right now, we're working with regards to some of these. We're finding that if the vendor name has a slight discrepancy or there's been a change in the address, some of those still are a manual effort that we do with the liaison of the Office of Finance. So the interconnectivity between those systems, there's not a talking piece. So it still is a manual connection with the Office of Finance to verify that the BTRC is in place.
And do you have a financial, I'm assuming a financial payment system, but you don't know if it's connected as the airport commented on theirs?
To my knowledge, they're not connected with those. Let me verify.
Why don't you come up and give your name?
County Department of Water Power. My understanding is they're not connected, but our payment staff should be looking for BTRC numbers. And the communication we did denote that they hold payments when necessary if there's an outstanding BTRC issue.
Is there sometime in our future that this will not be a manual system, that
That's our hope. We're hoping to get an actual interface, and we understand technically it's possible, but so far we have not had a chance to get that.
that interface is with Department of Finance? Do we have airports?
Yes, Glenn Robison with Contracts and Purchasing for the Harbor Department. We, too, have implemented internal controls within our department to ensure 100% compliance with BTRC numbers being authorized and approved prior to payment, both on our contracting side and professional service contracts, as well as on the procurement side. We do have a manual system. We don't have the automated description system described earlier that the airports have. However, we are looking at improving our system in the next year or two, and we'll be happy to look into a module that automatically stops payment pending the receipt of that number. Right now, all of our payments are checked manually prior to the issuance of a warrant, and that is all done in conjunction with our accounts payable staff and our chief financial officer. We're all on board.
Do any of these systems have a coordination in procurement with the city's procurement system or with each other to try and achieve economies of scale? Or in some cases, do you purchase the exact same items but do it separately from the other departments and from the city?
All three of our departments have different procurement systems. All three of us also piggyback off of general services city contracts and to achieve the greatest economy of scale. And all of us will piggyback off of state-funded contracts or state-awarded contracts or county or GSA, et cetera.
So even though your systems don't coordinate with each other on a computer basis, you do take advantage of those economies of scale already working with the city and the state. Great, thank you.
Let me ask the Department of Finance, are there other city departments other than these three that you have a working relationship in the same area to ensure that there's the registration?
Not to my knowledge, no.
With general services, I would assume between them and Public Works may have the most activity.
I'm not aware of any interface with them.
Okay. So we don't know if they're in better shape or worse shape as it relates to the compliance.
Well, their payments would go through the controller's office, which has very stringent controls on the payment to vendors. So I would assume that at that point that would be the catch right there. with the Controller's Office.
That's correct. Basically, all the other departments use FMIS, and so there are requirements for the BTRC number.
Just a comment on the fiscal impact, which is really where we're at. It says here, implementations of the recommendations outlined could increase the city's business tax revenues by an unknown amount. Two unknowns, but the three departments asking you, have you set internal goals of what might be accomplished by this, efficiency? Saving money, bringing in money, any of that?
Well, the airport's goal, of course, is to make sure that all our vendors have a business tax, are registered properly. In terms of what impact that has on the revenues the city, the tax revenues the city realizes, I think that would be a question that maybe
For your proprietary department, do you see it as being?
Well, any business taxes don't come to the airport, they come to the city. So I wouldn't be in a position to say how much airport vendors pay in business taxes to the city.
Well, the point is to get them all online, get them all done, and get the proper revenue stream,
Right.
obviously, what we're looking at. So the question is, do you see this, just curious, when you look at what you've taken in, how it's gone with all three departments, you see an increase coming out of this? If not, I just want to know that. If you do, we'd like to see it.
I think as far as the port goes, the number of payments that we made that didn't have DTRC numbers at the time were minimal, so the impact was not that great. However, right now, we have been in full compliance well over a year, so any gain that you might have realized in business tax has already been realized.
Same thing, DWP?
Yes, in some of our earlier correspondence, we had noted there that with a prior controller review, noted the average annual liability of registered and compliant city businesses is between $1,000 and $2,000 for each business that's activity generally conducted by city vendors. And so at question, when we did our final review last year in 2008, there were 9 that we're still working on after the fact of finding those addresses or the location of those vendors and getting the final registration. So overall, with the effort, 9 vendors and maybe that tax liability, $9,000 to $18,000 total.
We'll move this item and approve the motion. We'll note and file the DWP's 2 letters and also the Port of Los Angeles's May 2nd letter, and also LAWA's 2 letters that have been sent forward. We're going to add some instructions and ask that Department of Finance reestablish the liaison positions for these 3 departments. Also that the Department of Finance ensures that their response to the controller becomes a part of the council file. That also on dealing with the implementation of these procedures, we ask that the Harbor Department and the DWP model the LAWA program for electronic system for automatic compliance. And we'd ask the CAO to report back to us within a 60-day period as to their progress on that issue. We'd also ask that, request that the controller within a 1-year period complete a spot audit to ensure that these systems are structurally implemented so that we ensure that we do not have to revisit this issue. So we'll move that with those instructions. Next item.
Take us to item number 7. Item 7 is a city attorney report and draft ordinance relative to amending sections 12.26 and 98.0418 and adding section 19.16 of the Los Angeles Administrative Code regarding surcharges for general plan maintenance, and also correcting a typographical error in the original ordinance. The Planning and Land Use Committee on March 2nd recommended approval. As you may or may not be aware of, the ordinance establishes a surcharge for general plan maintenance to be imposed on all permit, plan check, license, or application fees provided for in Chapter 1 of the Muni Code, in amount equal to the greater 3% of the fee, or $1. Other existing surcharges, such as the fire hydrant fee and the arts development fee, would be excluded from the calculation of the surcharge. And lastly, the proceeds of the fee would be deposited into a new fund entitled Long Range Planning Special Revenue Trust Fund. Planning, yes.
This is a new trust fund.
This is a brand-new trust fund. You may recall that when we were speaking to the City Council in August about the new fee ordinance, one of the recommendations from the fee study was that the city consider this kind of a surcharge that almost all large cities use and most medium-sized cities use as a way of recouping some of the cost of the policy plans that are used to evaluate development proposals. And they recommended that the city start with a 3% surcharge that even in this economic time would guarantee about $1.5 million that would be devoted to bringing forward community plans. And that would at least guarantee some minimal effort on the community plan program. You may recall that we were hoping to keep 12 community plans going at all times, and the cost of that, including the contractual work for EIRs and traffic studies, was about $11 million a year to do that. So what this would allow us to do is, at a minimum, with no other resources, we would be able to bring forward a few at a time of the community plans that are very close to being finished, that already have the technical work done, and we certainly don't want to have those languish for a couple of years and have the EIRs and the traffic studies no longer viable.
And the 1.5 is what you consider minimum. It could go up significantly higher than that.
Yes, we're assuming that in the worst economic times, with the much diminished number of cases that are coming forward, it would still generate about 1.5 million, which would secure about 8 people to continue working on the community plans.
And then also this would be an interest-bearing account, that the interest stays within that account.
Yes, and it's a protected special fund that would only be used for this purpose. And hopefully in better times.
Say it again so the CAO hears that.
Yes, it is a protected fund that we're so trusting that would only be used for this purpose.
So how can we protect it in such a way that it can only be used?
Well, we have by this ordinance that you are looking at today does two things. It establishes both the fee, the surcharge, and establishes the special fund that would secure it in a protected fund. So that's what's before you today, the special fund and the actual new surcharge.
You're taking away all my bristles from my broom.
Yes. You know, the planning department has been working very hard over the last year to set up special funds for our fee revenue so that as we look at reducing the general fund, we will be less vulnerable in the planning department, and that we will have separated out and protected the actual fee revenue that's coming in. The planning department has often been seen as a wholly general fund department. And I am hopeful that if we are successful, Mr. Serrano is smiling at me. I am so adamant about this, I cannot begin to tell you. But it would be my hope that in our next budget year, what you will see is about 3/4 of our budget is protected through special funds, and only about 1/4 of our budget is actual general fund, which I think will make us much less vulnerable.
Gail, in this ordinance, there are 2 fees that are identified. One's a 6% surcharge and one's a 3%.
Actually, this particular ordinance that we're considering today is a 3% surcharge that is for general plan maintenance, and general plans, as you know, is also the community plans. So it is only 3.
established.
6%, Jan Zatorsky, the 6% is currently in our fee ordinance now, so the section that we're putting it into is in that same section, so the city
Tell us
attorney
what the 6%, so the public's aware that.
The 6% is the city planning systems development surcharge, and that's a 6% that manages all of our systems to maintain our zone information mapping system, our, planning case tracking
And how
system.
long has that been in effect? It's
That's
been
at
in
least
effect
about
for a
5
number of
years.
years. Yes.
And so these surcharges are a percentage of what the developer's paying for their permits.
Exactly. The calculation is based on the actual fee for either the building permit or the entitlement processing
The
fee.
6% is also in a special fund.
Yes, it is.
The one thing also, let me ask Ray, in the document from the city attorney, they lay out some specific issues about Government Code 6062A, where there's talk about a public hearing and a variety of specifics. Do we need to do any findings in this committee to address that? Or is it assumed that this?
I'll confer with the city attorney, but I believe by us having this discussion, it meets.
So we don't have to specifically reference that government code section that we comply with it?
No.
That's all my question.
No, I'd just add, I'm a big fan of this concept. This is a revenue that a lot of other cities have been charging for years, and it's been sort of a missed opportunity for us. And if we can find new revenue streams, we can protect jobs, we can protect critical services. And if you ask people throughout the city what their most important quality of life issues are, they generally, and certainly in my district, will say that it's traffic and land use. And this allows us to continue with our community plans and deal with those. So I'm excited about it. Now, I don't know why this didn't come to us sooner after August. What held it up?
I think that there was not full consensus among all of the other departments. I think Building and Safety expressed some concerns about adding a new surcharge to building permit fees, and I think that we just delayed it to give them an opportunity. That seems to have gone away. There seems to be no current objection.
Yeah, I think, and it's a new time as our financial picture has been more and more difficult. Is this a full cost recovery, or is it still?
No, it is not. Again, if the cost per year is close to $11 million to do 12 community plans, clearly 1.5. It allows us just to continue the work and take forward a lot of the technical work that we've already done.
Oh, not on that end.
Yeah.
In terms of what we're charging people for the services that then fund this community plan fund, are we at full cost recovery for that? Or could we have charged them more for
We
these?
certainly could have charged them up to the full cost of the entire community plan and general plan maintenance. We could legitimately, maybe not politically, or maybe it would not be a good idea for the development community, but we could have charged a fee that would collect up to the full cost, the $11 million. There are a few cities, not many, but a few cities that literally charge enough to cover the entire cost of their long-range planning program. Most cities charge for a portion of it.
So what we've done has been a pretty moderate step,
it's
but
a
an
modest-
moderate, appropriate step in the right
Exactly.
direction.
Exactly.
Okay.
One thing, Gil, I asked you, we have an email from Joyce Dillard. I'm going to ask Lorraine to give you a copy and ask you, would you answer her as to the
Absolutely.
specifics
Yes.
as to this ordinance so that she can get it directly from our planning director? And so we will concur with the Plum Committee report and approve the city attorney's report and draft ordinance. And as advised by our CAO, we'll view this hearing as complying with the Government Code 6062A.
Thank you, and we really support your, we appreciate your continued support. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Remove that item.
Okay, that takes us to item number 8, which was continued from the March 1st meeting. This is a motion to our City West End relative to the Bureau of Contract Administration with the assistance of the city attorney to report to council relative to providing preferential consideration in the bid process for contractors that have apprenticeship programs. I mean, this item, I believe, was held because there were a few questions that you had for the city attorney on the legality.
The reason that I held this was that, being that we didn't have access to the Public Works Committee information and there was no written report, it's unclear as to what the potential problematic issues are that we should be concerned about. And that's what I wanted to do.
Ted Jordan, Assistant City Attorney. From my perspective, when we start talking about preferences in the award of contracts, particularly construction-type projects, and we use the term bid preference, the charter has specific limitations as to what we can do, and there is not a lot that the city can do when you talk strictly in terms of a bid preference. The charter allows, in Charter Section 371, for bid preference for local contractors, and by local, the charter defines that as County of Los Angeles or State of California. It does not allow for a bid preference, so preferential contract award, for firms that have the apprenticeship levels. Now, I know the CONDAD is working very hard in the area of apprenticeship and through mechanisms such as project labor agreements and so forth. So,
is that also part of their effort on local hire?
Correct. It all folds into the same general problem in trying to address the needs of local hiring in the city of Los Angeles.
Now how does this conflict with what we approved several months ago on local hire for CRA projects? And Jan Perry has a request for an ordinance to incorporate all city projects in a local hire ordinance.
I'm not certain exactly as to what the action taken on the CRA side is. I could talk with our CRA attorneys, and certainly we can report back on
That's
this.
when I read this, and I saw that it was some potential problems. What I was wondering about is we just approved several months ago having local hire as part of CRA, and I know Jan Perry's ordinance is moving through the system for all city projects for local hire, and I believe that they also had an intern element or something in them. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that we're all going on the same path. If this motion is problematic, then how does it impact the current ordinance and the pending ordinance?
Again, I'd have to take a look at that ordinance. I've not been personally involved on that existing ordinance that you're talking about, or the pending ordinance. My concern is just on the contract award side. We can look at what is going on in the previous action and take a look at that. On the area of local hiring, we have worked in that area and addressed local hiring, and I know there's been more outreach requirements, and including for contracts, providing notifications through the city's departments as to what job opportunities available, and then requiring contractors to do first source hiring mechanisms where we make an effort to match up people with jobs created by our contracts.
So you said the narrow issue that you were concerned with about
bid preferences in contracts. So if you have one contractor that, say, is doing a better job at having an apprenticeship program, giving them, say, a 10% boost on their contract bid, that we really can't do, cannot.
Is that what you mean by problematic in the final comment here from you? It says the state law requires public works projects to be awarded to the lowest responsive bidder. The motion envisions giving preference beyond the requirements of the labor code, which the city attorney describes as potentially problematic.
Correct. That may have been a different city attorney, I think, when this was here before, but that's the issue that we're talking about.
And So how do we resolve that?
Well, that's, again, right now, I'm expressing that concern on the local, rather than giving the bid preferences for something other than local contracts. Local contractor doesn't mean local hiring. It means the location of the contractor.
But when my colleagues put the motion in, they're looking for local hire.
I understand.
And how do you work that in?
We don't necessarily have a clear answer on that, because the ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve, while it's something that everybody wants, can't be directly done through a bid preference. It has to be done through other ways. We work on that in the first source hiring context, where we ask our contractors to identify to the city any jobs that it's going to create, and then the city is requesting that contractor to then go through city departments to locate those workers. But it's not done as a bid preference.
Thanks.
Nothing else.
All right. You know, one thing, we'll concur with Public Works and note and file this on the issue of the bid preference regarding with the apprentice issue. We'd ask that at the time it comes to council, if you could provide us with a verbal report on how this issue relates to the prior local hire CRA ordinance and the pending city contract local hire ordinance that's currently going through the system, just to clarify. And I understand you said the narrow aspect of the bid preference puts us somewhat in a legal issue, but does this advice give us some pause as to what we're going forward on the local hire?
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll get that clear. So we'll move that with that instruction. And I think that's it. That's it. We'll adjourn. Thank you very much.